Herbert's 100 harem. The whistle slam of a Mar-Yatha hitting the ground almost makes Herbert wince. The creature had adjusted itself mid-fall and dodged the standing spear. He makes to move, but Yzma has a hand on his shoulder. "Just watch. I know you're a protector, but you have to have more faith in your wives," Yzma says, and Herbert is made to watch as the Mar-Yatha recovers from the fall in moments and then tries to charge down his wives. It finds itself surrounded and taunted at all sides by many Yauya and Dezedin, who taunt the creature and keep it confused. Then, all of a sudden, one of his girls pulls out a plasma pistol and takes a shot. Her aim isn't as good as his own. The plasma blast reduces a large back blade of the Mar-Yatha into char and infuriates the creature. Herbert tries a teleport with intention to kill the creature before it can hurt any of his girls. He hadn't said a thing about it, but sleeping with a stomach full to bursting and with a fully body bruise and a massive cuddle pile had been weird enough that his dreams had turned into nightmares. However, the operative word was try, as Yzma isn't letting him go anywhere. "Keep watching," she tells him, and he looks up at her before moving to draw his pistol, and another hand finds itself on his other shoulder. "You can't do all the fighting and hunting for them. It's in position to kill," he protests, even as several of his wives are forced to dodge a brutal swipe as the entire beast starts to turn, putting all its axiom-sharpened blades into motion as it speeds up. It then somersaults while curling into a bladed ball, but roars in pain and outrage as the roll brings it to put weight on the burnt blade on its back. The beast reflexively opens up and begins stomping around. "Have faith and relax. I'm a trained soldier. My job is to..." Herbert's cut off as another girl takes a shot with a laser rifle, and the Mar-Yatha actually partially dodges it, only to find a Zedin tail digging into its side. It turns to the direction of the pain, but its movement reveals a gap in the blades that gets a tail blade stuck into it. It turns again, and a much calmer, much more accurate shot lights up its side, reducing a pair of bone blades into char, and as it turns to try and meet the attacker, it flinches back as the burnt nerves are now limiting its movement. But it still opened the creature up, and this time, a Yauya slams a spear into the beast's side. Herbert starts to relax and keeps an eye above them. A few more Mar-Yatha are starting to be drawn by the sounds of combat and the scent of spilled blood. The forest had a huge number of creatures. He wasn't sure much about their pack mentality, but it seems that the species was very opportunistic. They hunt individually, but if they smell a fight going on or hear it, then they come running. It's the sheer population's numbers and density that has Herbert baffled, even as he watches another 3 Mar-Yatha show up from above. "Eyes up, girls! We have company!" he calls out and gets a slightly reproving squeeze from Yzma. "I know it's hard for you to see others in danger, but they need to grow. I didn't jump in. Not like I can with you here," he answers as he sees the girl with the plasma pistol work up her nerve and take another shot. This one actually hits the beast in the head, and the sizzling noise is the only sound the creature makes as it dies instantly. The girls let out a slight cheer, but several arms and tails are pointed upwards as 2 more Mar-Yatha start their drop. Not time to set up the trap, but time aplenty to dodge. The Mar-Yatha land on other side of their dead fellow and slightly to the side as well. The big beasts can actually steer their fall a little, and without a clear target below will actually veer to the side and hit a distance away from where you think it will. It was something Herbert had only suspected yesterday and had left behind an illusion of himself for a reason. The impacts of the beast can be felt even at the far edge of the clearing, and Yzma outright smiles as she watches. "And now we see who's got what it takes," Yzma states even as she blocks another teleport from Herbert. "You're not getting out that easily. You need to see what they're capable of," and he slips out of her claws as he bluffs out her axiom sensing and makes it seem like he's hardening himself, but just under that wavelength, he has a teleport go off fast. It doesn't avail him anything as she pounces on him instantly. No, 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 you're going to watch your wives grow stronger and you're going to like it, Isma tells him and holds him up and makes him watch. Hey girls, you're very lucky to have a man so protective. He'd fight the entire Maryatha species for you at this rate. There are some cheering whoops from the girls as they go with the tactics they used earlier and are bolder this time around, going for far more brutal shots at the beasts as they hound and harass the creatures with pack tactics. See, you can relax. They're fine, she says, letting him go. The moment she does so, he draws his plasma pistol and lets out a shot in midair. The third of the newly arriving Maryatha was in the midst of a fall and he roasts one of its shoulders before cursing. Then the plasma pistol is pulled away. That's more than enough of a handicap for them, Isma remarks. You have to let your wives grow. The weapon then shook and rattled in her hand before launching into Herbert's, and she tilts her head curiously. That wasn't a normal touch of telekinesis, she notes, and he grins before stowing the weapon. Isma had been right to stop him from interfering further. The third Maryatha just made things confusing and more difficult for the other two. They may be a social enough species to not kill each other on sight, but they didn't know how to fight together, or how to even avoid getting into each other's way. Likely the reason for this was that the initial drop killed almost anything, so any ground fighting was more a threat display to others of their own kind than a fight for survival. The Maryatha are so eager to get into each other's way, and even more eager to bully the one Herbert maimed, that the girls have time to quickly put a plan together. They quickly focus their attention on the uninjured two, and with some laser and plasma bursts thoroughly injure them as well, making the fight between the three Maryatha into something more even. All three of them are now confused and trying to snarl at each other and keep track of the circling girls, who are opening up small holes in their hides and slowly painting the area in blood. Herbert finds Isma putting a finger to his mouth to shush him before he can warn the girls about the additional Maryatha arriving above. These three were only the first to arrive. Your reaction is a lightning-fast slaughter. What do your wives do? Isma asks him, and despite himself, he finds himself intrigued at the question. Teenagers or not, these girls are the ones who've been training to hunt these beasts for years and grew up on the stories of what to do. What will they do? The question burns even as more Maryatha begin to drop, several of them staying up in the canopies to watch and evaluate. With so many others of their kind around, they must be weighing the costs and benefits of dropping. Even if they can stick a flawless landing, they still have to climb into the tree again afterwards. And if there's not enough food down there for them to get without too much of a fight, then it's just not worth it. Herbert had been wondering when he'd see that particular predatory trait. Thushiness. That's really just a cost-benefit analysis that the creature is deciding weighs too far into the cost side of things. With how many Maryatha there are down there and the sheer amount of fighting, most of the animals in the canopy have clearly judged this as too big a fight to be worth it. Still, another 3 healthy Maryatha have dropped, which seems to be the saturation point for Maryatha in the area. 1 dead, 3 injured, and 3 healthy. The healthy ones follow their opportunistic instincts and ignore the smaller Zedine and Yaoya, clearly considering them simply mobile meat and not a direct threat. The Maryatha are learning. Some 400 years ago, they used to simply drop without consideration. If there was food to be had below, then they didn't care how many of their people that they had to carve through to get more. But it appears even a species of animals can be indirectly taught, Isma explains. Herbert considers as he watches the girls adjust and use the Maryatha competitive nature against them. The occasional flare of plasma or laser evening whatever odds there are to keep things close as the beasts effectively slaughter themselves for them. Maybe one day we'll accidentally make a new race of the Maryatha? Well, Isma begins. Has that already been done? Herbert asks slowly as he turns to look at the suddenly bashful Isma. You have, haven't you? Once a race starts getting into the active axiom use, then it's maybe 100 generations away from being a galactic species in their own right. I remember when the Sonir variants went from creatures you could hunt into a people and therefore rightly protected. How many? Herbert asks after a few moments. He didn't miss the wisps of an old sense of shame drifting off the ancient Zedin. How long have Sonir been out in the galaxy? At least a millennium, likely more. Isma's really wearing her age. Less than I've given back to the galaxy. Still not enough, though. I am a huntress and a teacher, a protector and matriarch. I am not a murderess. But they weren't people yet, but they were so close. Then Isma straightens up. But no, with Marjatha, they're not intelligent. Not even intelligent enough to serve as pets. Too violent, too opportunistic, too unwilling to cooperate with even their own kind. No, if they are ever to be a people, it will require direct intervention from another race for it to happen in the next 100,000 years. Okay, Herbert says as he watches the Marjatha above clear away. This prize is too much for them. He decides to ask the question and do his research next time he has some alone time, meaning likely the next time he takes a crap. So, this is going to be very morbid, but when the Sonir were still animals, what was hunting them like? Well, that's a question and a half, isn't it? She asks him, and he shrugs. I'm intrigued. I could dance around the issue, but I don't think that would help. The idea of fighting a Neanderthal or caveman appeals to me on some level, and those are ancestors to humanity. Heck, fighting a gorilla and not being instantly torn to shreds would be a hell of a thing, and that's an even more ancient ancestor. Herbert remarks, wait, how would the less evolved variants of your own kind be so much stronger? My kind were repurposed to retain nutrients longer and survive famines in greater groups. It also allowed a great deal of travel and such. So our muscles shifted to allow more consistent movement, but much weaker as well. A gorilla walks around like a Sonir without wings and is generally strong enough to reduce a human being into pulp with ease. Are they aggressive? Peaceful as a species, but extremely aggressive if provoked. Fast and strong enough to get around or through most defenses short of military grade, and if they get upset with you, then you best hope that it just wants to give you a scare, Herbert says. Are they intelligent? For an animal, extremely. They have a very rudimentary society and can be taught a very basic language and spoken with to some degree. But it's not easy and requires a great deal of patience. They're a bit more along than the Sonir were, or rather the Arctha Night Flyers as they were known then. If not for the null of cruel space, then your gorillas would easily be another race already. I have to admit, that's a more disturbing thought than anything else going on right now. Just how many races, possibilities, and peoples has the null destroyed? Herbert asks out loud. Countless, dear boy, do remember there are more worlds than just your own in cruel space. Isma reminds him, and a shiver goes through his soul at the thought of so much life just never given the chance. The Arctha Night Flyers were either silent predators or highly territorial herbivores that could track you through echolocation. They were, and still are, strong enough to rip off the limbs of most races. And when they were more animal-like, they would also wear the blood of their victims in crude shapes to both mask their own scent and as a mating display. Very dangerous, and the intelligence made it so they could potentially reverse a hunt. Wonderful prey, but a better people. My Sonir sons and daughters have shown me that. I thought your sons were all Zeden, Herbert remarks, remembering the genetic peculiarity that Isma has. 9 in every 10. Isma corrects him, and then Herbert's eyes go somewhat wide when he puts it together and realizes that Isma must have personally mothered hundreds, if not thousands of Sonir, and still feels guilty for hunting their ancestors. Not that having her family composed of so many of them would alleviate such guilt. I'm sorry for bringing up the subject, Herbert apologizes. You don't need to coddle me. I'm mature enough to understand your curiosity. It's just a sour subject, Yzma assures him. That doesn't mean it wasn't rude, so I apologize regardless. I also apologize for doubting my girls. My goodness, they bled those Mar-Yatha dry. Herbert remarks in first a solemn and then amused tone as he changes the subject to something they would both prefer. Not every hunt is finished in a single masterstroke. Sometimes you need to run the prey aground. Or outlast them. Granted, I haven't had a chance to use persistence hunting out here, so I've had to go with a single overwhelming blow. I must admit, I do want to see persistence hunting in action. I'd like to show it too, but it's the sort of thing where you go after something skittish and just keep it scared, not something that works with a Mar-Yatha. It goes on the offense far too quickly, Herbert answers. Perhaps another trip later then. We are family now after all. That sounds wonderful. Now, if you'll excuse me, I promise to help with the butchering.